The story of Yu Menglong is often told in a straight line: ambition, talent, opportunity, and the steady climb into the spotlight. But that version leaves out something quieter, something harder to trace. Because behind the moments that defined his rise, there was another presence, an actor whose name never made headlines, whose face never quite stayed in memory, yet whose influence seemed to linger in ways no one could easily explain. It started during a period when Yu Menglong was still searching for his footing, navigating auditions that blurred together and roles that felt just out of reach. On one particular set, small, almost forgettable by industry standards, there was someone new. Not a star, not even a recognizable supporting name. Just another actor, credited so briefly that most people would miss it entirely. He kept to himself, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and had this unsettling calmness about it, like someone who already knew how things would unfold. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Actors come and go all the time, especially in smaller productions. But there was a pattern, subtle, almost invisible. Whenever Yu Menglong struggled with a scene, this unknown actor would appear nearby. Not interfering, not offering advice directly, just present, watching, and then strangely things would shift. A line would land better. A performance would suddenly click. Directors who had been hesitant would change their tone. It was as if something unseen had been adjusted. No one questioned it, not then. In an industry built on coincidence and timing, small changes are easy to dismiss. But over time, those small changes began to stack into something much bigger. Yu Menglong started getting noticed, not explosively, but steadily. The kind of steady rise that feels almost engineered, as if each step had been carefully placed before he even took it. What made it stranger was that the unknown actor never followed the same trajectory. He remained on the edges, taking roles that barely registered, appearing in scenes that could be cut without altering the story. Yet somehow, he was always there at the right moments, orbiting just close enough to matter, but never close enough to be acknowledged. There were whispers, of course. Crew members who vaguely remembered him, but couldn't recall his name. Editors who noticed he appeared in footage that wasn't in the original call sheets. Even a casting assistant once mentioned that his file seemed incomplete, as if parts of his history had simply not been recorded. But these were fragments, easy to ignore, easier to forget. For Yu Menglong, the turning point came during a project that was supposed to define him. The pressure was higher, the expectation sharper, and for the first time, things didn't come easily. Scenes dragged. Confidence wavered. There was a sense that the momentum he had built might finally slip. And then, just as quietly as before, the unknown actor returned. This time it was different. He didn't stay in the background. He took on a slightly more visible role, still minor, still easily overlooked, but enough to share the frame more directly. And in those shared moments, something shifted again. Yu Menglong's performance deepened, sharpened, became something more than what it had been. Critics would later call it a breakthrough, the moment he truly became undeniable. But they never mentioned the other actor in those scenes, the one who stood just out of focus, delivering lines that seemed ordinary, yet carried an odd weight. After that project, the unknown actor disappeared. Not gradually, not with any announcement, just gone. No new credits, no social media presence, no trace of where he went next. Attempts to track his past roles led nowhere, as if the records themselves had been thinned out over time. People who tried to recall working with him found their memories frustratingly incomplete, like trying to hold onto a dream after waking up. And yet, his absence was as noticeable as his presence had been. Because from that point on, Yu Menglong's career no longer followed the same pattern. He was still successful, still recognized, but something had changed. The precision, the almost unnatural timing of his earlier rise, it softened. His choices became more unpredictable, his performances more varied, sometimes brilliant, sometimes questioned. It was as if whatever invisible alignment had guided him before was no longer there. Fans began to notice, even if they couldn't explain what they were seeing. They went back to older clips, older dramas, trying to pinpoint what felt different. Some focused on his acting style, others on roles he chose, but a few, just a few, noticed something else. In certain scenes, there was always someone nearby. A figure who didn't draw attention, yet seemed impossible to ignore once seen. Theories started to form, as they always do. Some believed the unknown actor had been a mentor of sorts, someone who understood the industry in a way others didn't and chose to guide from shadows. Others thought it was coincidence, a trick of editing and perception, the human tendency to find patterns where none exist. And then there were those who leaned into something more unsettling, the idea that not every influence can be easily explained, that sometimes the people who shape a story are the ones who leave no trace behind. Yu Menglong himself never spoke about it. In interviews, he remained focused on his work, his growth, the usual markers of an actor's journey. If he remembered the unknown actor, he gave no sign. Or perhaps he chose not to, because acknowledging something like that would mean admitting that parts of his path weren't entirely his own. But every so often, in certain performances, there's a flicker of something familiar. A moment where his timing feels just a little too precise, where a line lands with the kind of weight that seems to come from somewhere deeper than rehearsal. And in those moments, it's hard not to wonder. Not about Yu Menglong's talent, that's never really been in question, but about the quiet, almost invisible force that may have helped shape it. The actor who never took center stage, who never claimed credit, yet may have altered the course of a career in ways no one can fully prove. And maybe that's the point, because some stories aren't meant to be confirmed. Some influences aren't meant to be seen clearly. They exist in the background, in the spaces between what we notice and what we overlook. And in the case of Yu Menglong, the most important role in his story might belong to someone the world was never meant to remember. And just when it seemed like the story had settled into silence, something small began to surface again, so subtle that most people ignored it the first time. It started with a clip. Not a major release, not a headline moment, just a behind-the-scenes video from one of Yu Menglong's more recent projects. Fans were watching casually at first, focused on his expressions, his interactions, the usual things. But then someone paused the video, rewound it, played it again. In the background, just for a second, there was a figure. Out of focus, half turned away, easy to dismiss. But something about the posture, the stillness, it felt familiar in a way that was hard to explain. The clip spread quietly, not viral but persistent. The kind of thing that doesn't explode overnight, but refuses to disappear. People began comparing it to older footage, scene by scene, frame by frame. And the more they looked, the more unsettling it became. Because the figure, if it really was the same person, hadn't changed. Not in the way time usually leaves its mark. The posture was identical. The presence just as controlled. Even the way he seemed to exist slightly outside the main action, it matched too perfectly. That's when the conversations shifted. This wasn't about coincidence anymore. Not entirely. Some started asking deeper questions. Why did this person only appear around key moments in Yu Menglong's career? Why was he never credited properly? Why did no one seem able to clearly identify him, even when given direct images? And the strangest part, why did he always seem closest when something important was about to happen? Around the same time, fans noticed a change in Yu Menglong again. Subtle, but undeniable. His recent performances began carrying that same sharp precision people had associated with his earlier breakthrough period. Lines landed differently. Emotions felt more controlled, yet more intense. It wasn't just improvement, it was a shift back into something that felt guided, as if something had returned. Of course, there was never any confirmation. No official statement. No sudden reveal of a hidden collaborator or long-lost mentor. Just fragments, clips, screenshots, quiet observations passed between people who were paying a little too much attention. And then came the most unsettling detail. In one particular scene, during a close-up that wasn't meant to include anyone else, there was a reflection, barely visible in a piece of glass, behind Yu Menglong. Most viewers missed it completely. But those who caught it couldn't unsee it. A figure standing still. Watching. Not part of the scene, not interacting, just there. What made it disturbing wasn't just the presence. It was the positioning. Because based on the camera angle, that reflection shouldn't have been possible. There was no one supposed to be standing there. No crew. No actor. No reason for anyone to be in that exact spot. Except something or someone was. After that, the discussions went quiet again. Not because people lost interest, but because the tone had changed. It no longer felt like a theory to debate or a mystery to solve. It felt like something you either accepted or chose to ignore. And maybe that's how it's always been. Because if the unknown actor truly did return, he didn't come back for recognition. He didn't step into the spotlight or rewrite the narrative. He simply slipped back into the same position he had always occupied, just close enough to influence, just distant enough to remain unseen. Which raises a question that no one has been able to answer. If someone can shape a career without ever being acknowledged, if they can appear, disappear, and return without leaving a trace, then how many moments we believe belong to one person were never entirely theirs to begin with? And more importantly, if you went back and watched closely enough, how many times would you start to see him too?